Hi, this is Chris from the Stephanie Miller Show. Please enjoy this exclusive clip from Political Voices Network.
Biden blasts Trump and denounces political violence. Judge reinstitutes gag order on Trump for election subversion case. I think he's already violated it. I mean, he's clearly inciting violence against witnesses and everybody else. What do you think's going to happen there?
Well, first and foremost, somebody's going to get hurt, which is why this judge is acting. Prosecutors, witnesses, courthouse staff, judges' staff, somebody is going to get hurt. And I truly believe that Trump doesn't care about this. His actions seem to prove that. I also think he won't mind being put in a lockup for contempt or violation of the gag order, because it feeds right into this victim mindset he has. I'm a victim. My free speech is being suppressed. And I think his donors and voters will climb if he's behind bars for contempt. So how do you deal with that as a judge? Well, we're soon going to find out.
Yep. It's been, let's be honest, a depressing weekend. And I'm sure, at the FBI, this is what you're afraid of. They just found the gunman in Maine dead. Friday, there was two other, I guess they weren't mass shootings, but in Tampa and Chicago over the weekend. Do you worry about copycat stuff as much as I do when this happens?
There's no question that, it's a valid concern. It's not just kind of this unfounded anxiety. We do know that people do mimic mass shooters, spree shooters, and it gets into this catch-22. You've got to publicize this. There's public safety issues. You've got to update the public, but at the same time, every time you do that, you may be planting the seed in somebody's misguided brain that this is something that gets you famous. And so I cringe whenever I hear the name of a shooter repeated. I think we should be calling them the murderer instead. But yet when someone's on the run or you can't find them, you do have to show the photo. You do have to mention the name, because we've got to capture the individual before he kills again.
Yeah. And Frank, it's just, you tweeted, a well-regulated militia committed to a mental facility for 2 weeks after hearing voices and threatening to shoot up a base. I mean, this is one of those things where you're like, wow, there were beyond red flags, right? His family, his coworkers, the people at the base. Police across Maine were just alerted last month to veiled threats by the U.S. Army reservists who would go on to carry out the worst mass shooting in the state's history, one of a string of missed red flags that preceded the massacre. Apparently, they went to his house at one point, and he wasn't home. So that's it. They were afraid he was going to snap and commit a mass shooting, and they just. How does that happen, Frank?
Yeah. So it's funny, yet not funny. I kind of have an automatic file that I download in my brain when I'm going on the air with a mass shooting, and I take time, for example, to talk about the warning signs and indicators. And I almost started doing that when this happened last week, and then I stopped myself, of course, because we don't need to educate the public on warning signs and indicators in this particular case. They were all there. So it's what we have to do now with this investigation is focus on the gaps and what fell through those cracks and gaps and fix it. Because I'm not certain yet that existing rules, policies, and laws were followed. So I know we hear calls for, let's pass a new law. Well, wait a minute. I think maybe existing rules weren't followed here, and one of the gaps that I think is easily fixed. But let's get into the weeds and see what happens as we move forward. But this guy went to training for the Army Reserves. He's from Maine, but he went to training at West Point in New York, and that's where his superiors committed him for 2 weeks because of a real concern for his own safety and others. So here comes the New York State troopers to transport him to the military hospital in New York. What it seems didn't happen, and we need to flesh this out, is that New York never entered him in their own red flag system, nor did they go to Maine and said, this guy has a problem and likely shouldn't have weapons. So what's the gap? The gap seems to be military. We've seen this gap before, by the way, a few years back in Texas. A church shooting where the Air Force never entered their guy into the NICS system, National Instant Check System. In this case, I don't think that happened. I don't think there was any. You heard the police and public safety commissioner in Maine at a press conference say, we didn't, almost with kind of sarcasm, we can't find any evidence of involuntary commitment. So why do I say that's easily fixed? The president is the commander in chief of the military, right? Yeah. He doesn't have to pass a law to order the military to enter the goddamn threat into the system and share it with superiors at the other guys, at the guy's base in Maine, and put it in the system and take action.
Yeah, despite earlier threats, the FBI said Card had not been on its radar, saying it did not have or did not receive any tips or information concerning Robert Card. The Bureau added its instant background check system was not provided with or in possession of any information that would prohibit him from lawful firearm purchase. So let's talk to me for a minute about it. It says, while Maine does not have a red flag law, it has a more limited yellow flag law that would still allow police to petition a judge to take a person's firearm away if a medical practitioner deemed him to be a threat. But as you say, none of this worked, right?
Exactly. So I'm not a huge fan of the so-called yellow flag law. I get that Maine is a big hunting state, so they want to take a softer approach to ever taking someone's weapons away. I totally get that. But why I don't like yellow flag is because what Maine does is they insert a third party in this picture. That's a mental health or medical professional who has to sign off on taking the weapon.
Yeah.
I don't like any insertion of any more time or parties between threat and addressing the threat. Let the police, what red flag laws do in other states is let the police look at the threat, talk to the family, let the family or police petition a court to quickly take the weapons temporarily with due process. But here, no, let's insert a medical professional, try to find one in the middle of the night. It's unwieldy. It doesn't seem to work.
Yeah.
And again, it's garbage in, garbage out. If you can't enter it in the system, you forget, as New York may have forgotten, I don't know, then nobody has anything to go on.
One thing I did want to ask you, Frank, is one expert was quoted here saying just because there appears to be a mental health nexus to the scenario, the vast majority of people with mental health diagnosis will never hurt anybody. And interestingly, I got a tweet from a listener of ours who said, Steph, as the mother of a son who has a mental health condition, it pains me when you shout mentally ill as an accusation in your description of the killer in Maine. That crushes the hearts of the mentally ill and their families who battle stigma every day. That obviously is true. So yet we're at 565 mass shootings this year, and it's still only October. So, she makes a good point, and so does this expert, that of course the vast majority, will never hurt anybody. But how, obviously, there are enough dangerous mentally ill people that we are literally probably will hit 600 mass shootings this year. So
exactly, and everything that your writer said is true, and I'm guilty of this sometimes. I try very hard when I'm on the air to say violently mentally ill or evidence of a mental illness with violent ideology. That's the real distinction here, and so that's true. It's also incredibly true that we have a great disparity between the percentage of mental illness in this country and the number of professionals who can actually address it. If you've ever had a friend or loved one that needed help in a hurry and you've tried to get an appointment with a mental health professional, good luck. It's a real problem. And so there's a solution to that. Guess what? After the Virginia Tech shooting, we did add this mental health flag into the NICS system, the instant check system. But it's again, garbage in, garbage out. There's a way to handle this. We're just not using the existing mechanisms to do it.
President Biden called on Republicans in Congress, good luck, to help keep Americans safe from gun violence, praised police for their work. Here's one headline that depressed me, Frank. I just want to get your take on it. We're seeing fear. Maine killings prompt a huge spike in gun purchases. Several of the area's gun dealers, this is in Maine, were open for business Thursday, the day after the shootings, when the suspected gunman was still at large, while nearly all other businesses abided by shelter-in-place order advising residents to stay off the streets. Some gun stores answered spiking interest in gun ownership by opening their doors. They've since reported abnormally high sales of all types of firearms. One store said they typically sell about 20 firearms a day. They've been selling 5 times that many since Thursday. Every third purchase is an AR-15. I mean, it just feels like this endless cycle of gun violence is never going to end some days. What do you think? I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, I've seen those same reports. And I also see the irony in this, right? We've got a hellacious gun problem. We've got mass and spree shooters. This guy was both a mass and spree shooter. And so what's the answer? More guns, please. Now, I have to say, I understand. I do understand. If you live in the very rural state of Maine, the response time out in the boondocks, right, in the woods and forest country, is going to be very lengthy. If you're in trouble, I understand the need to want a gun. I got it, to defend your family. But this is illustrative of why it's even more important for Maine to get with the program and to allow family and law enforcement to quickly hold someone's weapons when they see an articulated violent threat. I get it. And by the way, this also creates, if you want to get into the economics of the gun business, they know that gun sales are going to go up after a mass shooting. They know it. For two reasons. People are going to want to protect themselves, understandably, and they also push, the NRA and gun shops push, and now they're going to come get your guns because, here it is again, they're going to take them, so you better get them now. So here we are.
And Frank, we've talked about this before, but I feel like there is a timidity in the mainstream media to call this out for what it is, that this Maine shooter, like 90-something% of these shooters, is a right-winger, is a white guy right-winger, who retweeted every MAGA account, including Don Jr. We just had Joe from Syracuse wrote and said Fox, he watched Fox all Friday night, didn't even cover it, that the gunman was found dead. He said, was it because Robert Card was one of their own? He was white, he was right-wing, he murdered people in cold blood, young families in rural Maine. Do they not want to share this info with Fox News viewers, especially in Maine? I watched during the 10 o'clock hour, half the 11 o'clock, nothing on Fox. They were all broadcasting live. I mean, and of course, the answer is of course. If it were a brown person, they'd be covering it 24/7. But I just feel like there's a timidity in the media in general to talk about the ideology of a lot of these shooters.
There is, and I will tell you. So first, with regard to platforms like Fox, the truth hurts, and they don't want to put that out. And I've seen reports also that the shooter, some of his most downloaded or reposted material was Elon Musk material.
Yep.
That's interesting.
You know what I feel like I would like to do is I would like more time with you and Glenn Kirshner. Maybe I'd like to cruise away from all this. How would I do that, Frank, if I wanted to go on a cruise with the two most handsome romantic men?
All this bad news, all this terrible tragedy, I feel uncomfortable, even trying to market the idea of vacationing next summer. But I feel like more people than ever say, get me out of here. Yeah. I need a break. Yeah. How can I plan one with people that are like-minded, passionate about justice?
Yeah.
Well, you can. Glenn Kirshner from MSNBC Legal Analyst and myself, next summer, we're getting out of here. We're going on a Mediterranean cruise. You can find out more. It'll be in July. It's Athens to Barcelona. Go to my website, frankfigliuzzi.com. You can find the details there if you want to break.
And we link to it too. All right, Frank, thanks so much. I know you're so busy. Go get some sleep. There it is, my first drink of the day, ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic. Many of you know my story. I stopped drinking wine for 3 years during COVID, during the lockdown as part of a health reset. Now I drink wine in moderation, but this is an amazing new product. I've always believed in probiotics. And ZBiotics, check this out. You drink just one of these. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. I am using this and I feel great in the morning. I don't have to worry if I have an extra glass of wine, I still feel great in the morning. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. I've always had acid reflux problems. It is this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. All I know is it works. It is ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic. Go to zbiotics.com/politicalvoices or scan the QR code on the screen right now.